Watch. No, he's going to say it. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا عاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم عبد الله ورسوله ما بعد. We thank the Almighty Allah for another opportunity. We thank Him for His mercies that He's bestowed upon us. We bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except the Almighty Allah. We also bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is His servant and His messenger. Whosoever the Almighty Allah guides is really guided, and anybody who goes astray has nobody to blame but themselves. Alhamdulillah, today is a Thursday, the 8th day of Safar, 1445 years after the hijrah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which corresponds, I believe, with the 24th day of August 2023. As usual, this is Imam Noor's class, and he's traveled, and we want to use this opportunity once again, to remember his mother, in our du'as. The Almighty Allah, answered her call yesterday, and she was buried today earlier in the morning. And we ask the Almighty Allah to forgive her, grant her Jannah, and make whatever sacrifices her son is doing on the cause of the Ummah, in teaching, in learning, in guiding people, and helping people. May the Almighty Allah give her double of the reward that he gets, because inshallah, Al-Ummu Madrasa, the mother is a school, and the loss of a mother is something, that is huge. And for those of us who have lost mothers, really understand this. So we ask the Almighty Allah to forgive her and forgive the rest of our mothers and our parents and our grandparents who, have passed away on the path of Islam and Iman. Ameen. We're still on Hadith Jibril, the famous Hadith where Jibril alayhi salatu wasalam came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in the form of a human being, and then he came to ask the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam some questions. In our last sitting, we saw how Jibril came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He came and he sat in front of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to learn. And then we spoke about the importance of knowledge and some of the etiquettes of seeking knowledge. Just as a reminder, for us students of knowledge, there are some aspects or some points that we must really, really hold on to. Number one is ikhlas. When we are seeking knowledge, sincerity. It doesn't matter whether you are there at the university level, no, even day-to-day activities of, coming to a class like this or listening to a lecture online, it's all part of study, it's all part of learning. So number one, have ikhlas, that you are doing this for the sake of the Almighty Allah. Because when ikhlas enters into an act, it makes it more beautifying, and then it makes it more rewarding. Because don't forget, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ajaban li amril mu'min." Astonishing and amazing is the life or the issues of the mu'min. Inna amrahu kullahu lahu khair. Everything that is pertaining to the believer is always good for him. So whatever you find yourself involved in, so long as it's a beneficial something, always have ikhlas with it. It's very, very important. Number two, always have the humility to learn. It's very, very important. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, after the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if he knows that one of the Sahaba has a hadith, and he wants to learn the hadith from the Sahaba, he goes to the house of the Sahabi, and then sometimes it is time for afternoon nap, and you can imagine the heat of the desert. And Abdullah ibn Abbas will remain by the door of this Sahabi until the Sahabi comes out for Asr. And then when the Sahabi comes out, he finds Abdullah ibn Abbas, sitting there in front of his house, all wrapped up because of the heat of the desert and all these, wind and dust. And then he tells him, oh, cousin of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, oh, member of the household of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what are you doing here in this condition? He said, I heard that you have a hadith from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so I have come for you to teach me that hadith. And then the Sahabi will tell him, you are from the household of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All you have to do is sit in the house and send for me, and I'll come and give you the hadith. And then he tells him, al-ilmu yu'ta. Knowledge, we go to knowledge. Knowledge doesn't come to you. So long as you have the knowledge, I'll have to trek to you to get that knowledge. So humility is very, very important. Patience, in seeking the knowledge is very, very, very important. Without patience, you will not be able to acquire anything in life. And then also having a master, learning under someone. That is why in Islam, there's nothing like self-teaching. You can't teach yourself in Islam. Because even the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a teacher, allamahu shadidul quwa. Jibril alayhi salatu wasalam was the teacher of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam learned under Jibril. So this deen, you can't do self-teaching. The moment you want to do self-teaching, you're going to bring discussion and confusion, because some of the verses in the Quran are live verses. When I say live verses, when you're watching live news and, live programs, you will understand. For example, if you're watching a game, let's say a soccer game, and then after the game, another person asks for the scores of the game, and you tell him it's 2-0 or 1-0. But when you watch the game, you know when a yellow card was given, right? And you know why a yellow card was given. But this guy, you tell him, this guy was given a yellow card, you have to explain to him, because he didn't see the game. Excuse me, with all due respect to the Quran, this is a little below the Quran using as an example. But then there are verses in the Quran that are live verses. Those who lived during the time of the revelation of the verse understand it more than us. Let me give you an example. Abdullah ibn Zubair ibn al-Awwam, his mother is Asma bint Abi Bakr, the elder sister of Aisha radiallahu anha. So he was asked concerning Safa and Marwa in Hajj, and then he said it is not wajib, it's not compulsory. And then he was asked, why did you say it is not compulsory? He said the verse in the Quran says, Inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah. Verily Safa and Marwa are amongst the signs of the Almighty Allah. فَمَنْ حَجَّ الْبَيْتَ وَاعْتَمَرَ. Anybody who goes for Hajj or Umrah, فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِ أَنْ يَطَّوَّفَ بِهِمَا. There is no sin upon him if he does tawaf between the two mountains. So from his understanding of the verse, it means that Safa and Marwa is optional, it's not compulsory, because the Almighty Allah say, if you do it, there's no problem upon you. And Aisha told him, no, that's not the interpretation of the verse. He said, okay, what's the interpretation of the verse? She said, in Jahiliyyah, Safa had an idol called Na'ila, and Marwa had an idol called Isaf. And the people were circumambulated between the two mountains, and then they were seeking blessings from those two idols. So when the Sahaba became Muslims, and then they came for Hajj, they were doing circumambulation between Safa and Marwa, and they felt in their heart as if they were doing something from Jahiliyyah. So the Almighty Allah revealed the verse, don't worry, what you are doing is not wrong, there's nothing wrong on you. So understanding the circumstances behind the revelation of the verse makes you really understand what the verse is. So imagine Abdullah ibn Zubair ibn al-Awwam. His father is Zubair ibn al-Awwam, one of the 10 people who are guaranteed Jannah. That is his father. And then his mother is the daughter of Abu Bakr Siddiq, but then he gets the verse wrong because he was not there. So imagine you and I today. So it's very, very important as a student of knowledge in Islam, you get a master, a teacher that you learn from. Let me give you another example. A guy bought a book in Tib, which is in medicine, and then there was part of, an illness where you have to bring this and bring this to, to bring them together to form, medicine. And then there was a typographical error in the book. Instead of Habbatu Sauda, they wrote Hayyatun Sauda. Instead of black seed, it was written black snake. And then he is teaching himself, because he can read Arabic, he thinks he understands Arabic, so he went looking for a black snake. And you know what is going to happen if he finds the black snake? It's going to sting him, he's going to die. So self-teaching is not something that Islam really, really, encourages. No. There are things that you can teach yourself, obviously, but then there are some nitty-gritty details in the deen that you need to sit in front of a teacher to learn. And sometimes not all knowledge is found in books. There are knowledge that comes from experience. So as a student, find someone that you learn from. And for those who teach, number one, there must also be ikhlas in what they teach. As we sit here, that is why I always remind you to always remember us in your prayer. Those of us who sit in front of you to give the lectures, do the mimbar, khutbah and stuff, always pray for us that the Almighty Allah takes away riyah, showing off from our hearts. That the Almighty Allah blesses us with ikhlas. Because all these things that we are doing, all these hours of reading, all these hours of research, typing, finding, and then we come and do it, not for the sake of the Almighty Allah, but for people to praise us, is for nothing, is zero. The Almighty Allah doesn't accept it. So for those who are teaching, we are still students. Those who are teachers, scholars, ikhlas is very, very, very important. That's number one. Number two, humility is also very, very, very important. Very, very important. Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he was teaching, and then the masjid was full of students. And each and every one of those students, his knowledge alone is a whole school to teach other people. But Abu Hamid sits in front of them to teach them. And he always prays that, Ya Allah, grant me ikhlas and grant me humility and tawadu. It is very, very important. Because humility, tawadu, bringing yourself down, not raising yourself above, the position that Almighty Allah has put you, feeling big in front of other people, not even responding to salam, and even, not even having time to sit with people, to talk to them. All these are traps of shaitan that shaitan puts on some student of knowledge. May Almighty Allah safeguard us. So after Jibril came to sit next to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he placed his hands on the thighs of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he said, فَقَالَ يَا مُحَمَّدْ صلى الله عليه وسلم أخبرني عن الإسلام. Muhammad, teach me Islam. What is Islam? فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الإسلام أن تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله وتقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة وتصوم رمضان وتحج البيت إن استطعت إليه سبيلا. So the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم in this part of the hadith enumerates 5 pillars of Islam. And when we say anything is a rukn or anything is a pillar, it means without it, whatever we are building cannot stand. So for example, this building that we have in, there are pillars in here to support the building, for the building to stand. So these 5 pillars are the pillars with which Islam was built. It doesn't mean that they are the only things in Islam. For example, if you're building and you have pillars, the pillars are not the only part of the building. You have the walls, you have the roofing, you have the furnishing. All of them make a part of the building, but then you need to get the pillars right. When the pillars are right, then the rest of the building is going to stand properly. But if the pillars are not right, then there's a problem with that. So Arkan al-Islam, the pillars of Islam, the 5 of these pillars, they are the ones that we need to establish. And if you observe the pillar of Islam, the first one, which is the kalima ash-shahada, is what we say with our mouth. But then again, the fact that we say it with our mouth, that's not the end. We'll come and explain into details the shahada. Because it's not only saying La ilaha illallah. Because if it's just mere saying La ilaha illallah, Fir'aun also said La ilaha illallah. قال آمنت بالذي آمنت به بنو إسرائيل وأنا من المسلمين. Fir'aun said it. He said, I believe in the Lord that Banu Israel believe in him, and I am also a Muslim. Fir'aun said it. It's not enough. And then when the uncle of Prophet Muhammad was on the deathbed, Prophet Muhammad told him, Ya Am, say La ilaha illallah. And Abu Jahl and Abdullah bin Abi Umayyah went next to Abu Talib, and he told him, Abu Talib, do you want to, deny the religion of your forefathers? Because they understood that when you say La ilaha illallah, it's not mere saying. It goes beyond that. So as Muslims, let's understand that when I say La ilaha illallah, that is not the end. Islam encompasses every aspect of our lives. Our day-to-day activities, our eating, our dressing, our thoughts, our education, our upbringing. Islam is a comprehensive system. Some modern day scholars said Islam is not a religion, it's a system. Because it encompasses everything. Whatever you can think of, Islam has something to say about it, whether directly or indirectly. The Yahud in Medina used to tease the Sahaba that what kind of people are you? Muhammad teaches you everything. Even how to go to toilet, Muhammad teaches you. If Islam teaches us how to go to toilet, do you think Islam will forget to teach us how to do business? Of course not. So the saying of La ilaha illallah is not only mere lip service. So if you observe Islam, there are actions of the lips, there are actions of the body, and there are actions of the heart, and then there are actions of the pocket. So Shahada is nutq. Salah is for the body. Siyam is the body. Zakat is the pocket. And Hajj is both the body and then the pocket. So every aspect of our body and of our life has a system of ibadah. Our eyes have the ibadah that they do. And what are the ibadah of the eyes? That is, they lower their gaze and don't look at haram. Our ears have the ibadah that they do, which is what? They don't just listen to anything. Our mouths have the ibadah that they do. That is, be mindful what comes out of your mouth. Yesterday, or the day before yesterday, someone sent me a video of a woman, and it is reported that Abdullah ibn Mubarak, one of our pious predecessors, met a woman who was lost in the desert, and whatever question he asks her, she gives him a reply from the Quran. He asked her, where are you going? And then she said, فَمَنْ يُضْلِلِ اللَّهُ فَمَا لَهُ مِنْ هَادٍ. Whoever gets lost, there's nobody who is going to guide him except the Almighty Allah. And then he asked her, where are you going? She said, سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده إلى من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله. She read the verse that Almighty Allah said, glory be to him who picked his servant from Masjid al-Haram in Mecca to send him to Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem, meaning she's going to Jerusalem. And then he asked her, whatever question he asked her, she responds with a verse from the Quran automatically. And then after he is able to find a way for her to meet, the people that she was traveling with, he asked her sons. And then her sons told him that our mother, for the past 40 years, she doesn't speak anything except the Quran. She is afraid that whatever is going to be recorded in her deeds should be the Quran and nothing else. So our mouths, the Quran. Our hands should be mindful what we touch and what we pick. Our legs should be mindful of where we are going, because the Almighty tells us in the Quran, الْيَوْمَ نَخْتِمُ عَلَىٰ أَفْوَاهِهِمْ. On the day of Qiyamah, our mouths are going to be sealed. وَتُكَلِّمُنَا أَيْدِيهِمْ. And the hands are going to speak. وَتَشْهَدُ أَرْجُلُهُمْ بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. And the legs are going to bear witness concerning what we did. You see this mouth that eats spice and eats salt and eats all those things, the mouth will always want to find a way out of trouble. So the Almighty Allah is going to seal the mouth, and then the body parts are going to talk. وَقَالُوا لِجُلُودِهِمْ لِمَ شَهِدْتُمْ عَلَيْنَا. After the body parts have given the witness against the body, now the mouth have been released, and then the mouth will ask the rest of the body, لِمَ شَهِدْتُمْ عَلَيْنَا. Why did you give this bad witness against us? قَالُوا. And the rest of the body will tell the mouth, أَنْتَقَنَ اللَّهُ الَّذِي أَنْتَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. Almighty Allah is the one who gave us the permission to speak. You are the one who was speaking in the dunya. We all kept quiet. Today we are the ones who are going to speak by the will of the Almighty Allah. So Islam, Deenun Shamil, it's an encompassing religion, and every aspect of our life, Islam has something to say about it. Today we are not going to speak about the Shahada. I just want us to look at some other hadith that speak about the 5 pillars of Islam. It's very, very important. It's not this only hadith. We have a lot of hadith. And also we have verses from the Quran that substantiate the 5 pillars of Islam, pointing to us that there is always a collaboration and corroboration between the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam al-Awza'i said that the Quran and the Sunnah have 3 relations. The first relationship is that the Sunnah comes to emphasize what the Quran says. For example, the Almighty Allah says, "Shahid Allahu annahu la ilaha illa huwa wal malaikatu wa ulul ilmi qa'iman bil qisti la ilaha illa huwa al aziz al hakim." This is the shahada. Shahid Allahu annahu la ilaha illa huwa wa aqimus salah wa atu zakat. We all know the verse. Ya alladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyamu kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. This is Sawm. And then wa atimul hajj wal umrata lillah. This is Hajj. These are different verses from different surah. And then this hadith of the Prophet Muhammad comes and says, Al-Islam an tashhad an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah wa tuqim as-salah wa tu'ti zakat ila to the end. Abdullah ibn Umar narrates a hadith that can be found in Bukhari and Muslim, where he said, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Buniya al-Islam ala khams. Islam has been built on 5 pillars. And then he narrates the whole hadith that we all know. Another hadith by Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu that is found in Sahih ibn Hibban. He says, Kunna nuhina an nas'ala Rasulallah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam an shay. He said, we were prohibited from asking the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam some things. And the reason behind this was that a man came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He said, Ya Rasulallah, where is my father? His father was dead. And the Prophet ﷺ said, your father is in Jahannam. And the man was worried. And Almighty Allah revealed the verse, Ya alladhina amanu, oh you would believe, La tas'alu an ashya'a in tubida lakum tasu'ukum. Don't ask concerning things that when the answers are given to you, you will feel bad. So the Sahaba were a little bit, skeptical concerning asking the Prophet Muhammad some questions, and then they were concerned. I don't want to go and ask questions. And the other thing was that the Almighty Allah revealed the verse, Ya alladhina amanu la tarfa'u aswatakum fawqa sawti an-nabi. O you who believe, do not raise your voice above the voice of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Sahaba, they want to speak to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they are concerned that, okay, what if my voice goes, above the voice of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And the Almighty Allah said, no, an tahbata a'malukum wa antum la tash'urun. Be careful, when your voice goes above the voice of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, your deeds will be destroyed. There is a Sahabi who had a very boisterous voice, Qasim ibn Shammas. I've forgotten his full name. When this verse was revealed, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam couldn't see him for a number of days. And then one of the Sahaba went to his house and then found him weeping and crying. He asked him, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been looking for you for 3 days. Where have you been? He said, a verse was revealed, and I think that the verse is speaking about me. So the verse was that he said, the Almighty Allah says, do not raise your voices above the voice of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I have a very loud voice, a very boisterous voice. It means all my deeds are destroyed. I'm going to go to Jahannam. So he's crying. He's not eating for 3 days. He's been weeping and crying. He couldn't go out to even meet the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was told, he called him and told him, no, you are not part of those people. It's those people who unnecessarily want to be louder than the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are some of the ways that the Quran gave etiquette to the Sahaba of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know the hadith of, Amr ibn As. Amr ibn As, after the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was asked to describe the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he went silent and he said, I can't. He said, but you sat with him. You lived with him. Why can't you describe him? He said, when we sit next to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, our heads are down and we have 2 conflicting thoughts at the same time. One part of our head is telling us, raise your head and look at his face. Another part is saying, that's very disrespectful, bring your head down. So that's how we live with him. So Anas is saying that we were prevented or prohibited from asking the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam some things. So we are always happy for someone to come from the village who is not aware of these things, and then he comes asking the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then we will listen to also pick some lessons from what the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is going to tell him. He said, وَنَحْنُ نَسْمَعُ, and then we listen. فَأَتَاهُ رَجُلٌ مِّنْهُمْ, and then a man came from nowhere. He came and then he said, Ya Muhammad, the Arab people from the backyard, the villages, the countryside, the Arabs, very tough people. He came, Ya Muhammad, Atana rasuluka yaz'am annaka taz'am anna Allah arsalak. Very strong words. He said, hey Muhammad, your messenger came to us claiming that you claim that Allah has sent you. Even the Almighty Allah who sent him and created him never called him Ya Muhammad in the Quran. There's nowhere in the Quran you see the Almighty Allah say Ya Muhammad. It's not there. He says, Ya Adam, uskun anta wa zawjuka al-jannah. O Adam, stay in the Jannah, you and your wife. Ya Nuh, bit bi salamin minna. O Nuh, the Almighty Allah calls him by his name. Ya Isa, inni mutawaffika wa rafi'uka ilay. Ya Ibrahim, qad saddaqta ar-ru'ya. Ya Yahya, khudh al-kitaba biquwwa. He calls all of them Ya by their first names. But he never called, he always says, Ya ayyuhan nabi. Ya ayyuhal muddathir. Ya ayyuhal muzammil. Anytime you see the name Muhammad in the Quran, it is always linked with Rasul. Wama Muhammadun illa Rasulun. Anytime you see his name mentioned just like that in the Quran, it is not a call from the Almighty Allah. It's rather a description by the Almighty Allah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He never called him Ya Muhammad. Not once in the Quran. He called him Muhammad 4 times in the Quran and Ahmad once. And all these times, it is not Ya Muhammad, Ya Ahmad. No, he's speaking about him. He's telling the people about him. But anytime he wants to speak to him directly, he calls him Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu taqillah. Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu lima tuharrim ma ahallallahu lak. Ya ayyuhal muddathir. Ya ayyuhal muzammil. He calls him with a description. But to call his first name, no. Ya Muhammad, no. The Almighty never did that in the Quran. So this guy comes and then he says, Ya Muhammad, oh you Muhammad, calls him just like that. And it's part of Adam. As young people, as Muslims, people who are elderly, let's be mindful of calling them by their first names. It's not part of our etiquette at all. As Muslims, it's not part of our etiquette. A sign of respect, someone who is old enough to be your father, add some prefix, add something of respect. It's very, very important. It's all part of the etiquette. So you find the Sahaba, they say, Ya Rasulullah. Or they say Abul Qasim, the father of Qasim, without calling him his first name. And I think it's something that, we should teach our kids. Sometimes kids come in and then they want to call you by your first name. And it's not something that we must encourage. Let's educate them that when someone is old enough, their name is heavy. It's heavy on the tongue. So they should be careful how, they call, just first name like that. No. Let's teach them that. It's all part of the etiquette and all part of the adab. So this guy comes and then strong words in the narration, but I think, is it Tabarani or An-Nasai? I'm not really sure. When he came, he said, oh Muhammad, I'm going to ask you some questions and I'm going to be hard on you. Straightforward. And then he said, your messenger, because the Prophet Muhammad sends, messengers to go to the villages to go and do da'wah. He sends his students, his team to go and do da'wah. So one of the students went to the village to go and do da'wah, and this guy, he was concerned. Is this guy really telling the truth? He says, Muhammad sent him from Medina. Okay, I'm going to go to Medina. So he goes to Medina, he enters the masjid, he finds the Prophet Muhammad, he said, Ya Muhammad, your messenger, he claims. When you tell someone and they claim, it means you doubt what they're saying. So your messenger came, he claims that you claim that the Almighty Allah sent you. And the Prophet said, Sadaqah, my messenger really spoke the truth. It's okay. فَمَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاءِ. Now this Arab Bedouin is asking the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَمَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاءِ. Who created the heavens? And the Prophet said, Allah. Okay. فَمَنْ خَلَقَ الْأَرْضَ. Who created the earth? And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah. He said, فَمَنْ نَصَبَ هَذِهِ الْجِبَالِ. Who planted these mountains on the earth? And the Prophet said, Allah. He said, فَمَنْ جَعَلَ فِيهَا هَذِهِ الْمَنَافِعِ. Who put in the earth all these goodies that the earth has? The gold, the diamond, the petroleum, the uranium, all these things that the earth has. Who put in them? And the Prophet said, Allah. قال, and this guy said, فَبِالَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, I swear by the one who created the heavens and the earth. وَنَصَبَ الْجِبَالَ, and then he planted the mountains. وَجَعَلَ فِيهَا هَذِهِ الْمَنَافِعِ, and then he put in them all these blessings and all these goodies. Allahu arsalak. Is it true that Allah sent you? This is what the guy is asking the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is it true that Allah sent you? قال نعم. And the Prophet said yes. Look at this procedure and look at all these indiscipline and disrespect. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was quiet. He said نعم. The most important thing for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this whole scenario is that he is able to teach the person and then answer his questions, not about his emotions or his ego as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is what is important for him, not his ego, because if he's going to respond to the guy back in the same terms that the guy was asking the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's good? Okay. And then he said, زَعَمَ رَسُولُكَ. Now he's finished with the first one, that the Almighty Allah created everything. Now he comes to the second point. زَعَمَ رَسُولُكَ. Your messenger again claims that you told him that we must pray 5 times a day. قَالَ صَدَقْ. The Prophet said, yes, my messenger was truthful when he told you that. And then he said, فَبِالَّذِي أَرْسَلَكَ اللَّهُ أَمَرَكَ بِهَذَا. Okay, another one. I swear by Allah, did Allah ask you this, to tell us this? And the Prophet said, nah, it's Allah who ordered me to tell you this. And then he said, قَالَ زَعَمَ رَسُولُكَ أَنَّ عَلَيْنَا صَدَقَةً فِي أَمْوَالِنَا. He said, you must give sadaqah. The Prophet said, yes. He said, did Almighty Allah tell you to tell us this? The Prophet said, yes, the Almighty Allah told me to tell you this. He said, okay, your messenger said we must fast once a year, 1 whole month. The Prophet said, yes, my messenger was truthful. He said, did Almighty Allah tell you to tell us this? He said, yes. Up to the end where he said, Naam, even Hajj. He said, fine, okay. I now believe you. The Almighty Allah said you should tell us all this. No problem, I've heard you. وَالَّذِي بَعَثَكَ بِالْحَقِّ. I swear by the one who sent you with truth. لَا أَزِيدُ عَلَيْهِنَّ وَلَا أَنْقُصُ مِنْهُنَّ شَيْئًا. I'm not going to add anything to this. I'm not going to reduce anything from it. These 5 things that you said Allah sent you with, I'm not going to add anything. I'm not going to reduce anything. فَلَمَّا قَفَّ قَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. After the man had left, the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم said, لَإِنْ صَدَقَ لَيَدْخُلَنَّ الْجَنَّةِ. If what he really says is true, that he's not going to add anything nor take anything out, he's going to enter Jannah. Someone will ask a question. Apart from these 5 pillars, if I don't do anything, I'm going to go to Jannah. Yes, that's what the Hadith said. But then the question here is, are you sure that the 5 pillars of yours are intact? Are they 100%? That's very, very important. It's a very important question you should ask, because there are other hadith that have come into this form, that have come in this form. And a man came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another hadith by Abu Huraira in Bukhari and Muslim. A man came. He said, "Ya Rasulullah, dullani ala amalin idha amiltuhu dakhaltu Jannah." He said, "Ya Rasulullah, teach me an act that if I do that act, I'm going to enter Jannah." The Prophet said, "Ta'budullaha wa la tushrik bihi shay'a." You worship the Almighty Allah. You don't associate any partners with Allah. Wa tuqimus salah. al-maktuba. You observe the 5 daily prayers. وَتُؤَدِّيَ الزَّكَاةَ الْمَفْرُوضَةَ. You give out the compulsory zakah. وَتَصُومَ Ramadan. And then you fast in the month of Ramadan. Here he mentions 4 things. قال, he said, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ. I swear by the one that my life is in his hands. La azidu ala hadha. I'm not going to add anything to this. In this hadith, he didn't mention even Hajj. Only 4 of the pillars. And then the man who asked the Prophet the question, the Prophet, he said, Ya Rasulullah, I'm not going to add anything to these 4 things that I have said. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Man sarrahu an yanzura ila rajulin min ahli jannah. Anybody who wants to see a man of Jannah, you should look at this man. So we have hadith from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that said, apart from the 5 pillars, if you do not add anything and then you do not reduce anything, you're going to go to Jannah. But the question is, how authentic and intact are our 5 pillars? That's the question. Because sometimes you say, Allahu Akbar. You've not paid your bills. You have to buy this. You know, it's almost the school year is about to begin. You need to take the kids, to go get them, school supplies. And by the time you realize the Imam says, Wala Dalin, Ameen. Sometimes in your own salah, you say Allahu Akbar. Instead of Fatiha, you start Attayyatu lillah, Zakiyatu lillah, Tayyibatu salawatu lillah. It happens. Sometimes in Tayyah, you see Attayyatu lillah, you start Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmil. Oh, whoa. I'm sitting and I'm doing Fatiha. So, the hadith is authentic. Yes, that when we are able to fulfill all the 5 pillars without adding anything to them, without taking out anything, pathway to Jannah. But the dilemma is, how sure are we that the 5 pillars are intact? That is why all these other acts come and support our 5 pillars. The nafilah after the salawat supports the salah. The adhkar that we do plug the holes that we're going to have in our ibadah. The istighfar that we do are going to cleanse. And you know very well that you can't do it. Especially in summer now. You do subhanallah, there's another subhanallah waiting for you here. You do a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, there's another a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim here waiting for you. So, the struggle is there. But then, the import of the message is that this hadith speaks also of 5 pillars of Islam. There's also another hadith by Bukhari and Muslim where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a hadith by Jarir ibn Abdullah al-Bajali, he said one day we went out with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam outside Medina, and then we saw a man, on a mount riding, whether a camel or a horse towards us. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, كَأَنَّ هَذَا الرَّاكِبَ إِيَّاكُمْ يُرِيدُ. I think this guy riding, he's looking for you guys, meaning he's looking for us. So when the man came to us, he said, Salamu alaikum, and we all answered. And the Prophet Muhammad asked him, Min ayna aqbalta? Where are you coming from? Qala min ahli wa waladi wa ashirati. I'm coming from my family, my wife, my kids, and my whole community. Qala fa ayna turid? He said, where are you going? Qala uridu Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He said, I'm looking for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He doesn't know who he is speaking to. And that's how the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam lives with the Sahaba in Medina. It is reported that you come to Medina, and the way the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam dresses, the way he sits with the Sahaba, you will not be able to differentiate him from them. Easy going person with the Sahaba. He is not ensconced on any seat. Well, when you come in, you see him sitting and the rest of the people are below him. No, that's not how he is. He is not dressed in a way that makes him appear differently from the rest of them. No. But in a class, when you come in, you know that this is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But then if everybody is sitting doing their own things, he is in one corner doing his own thing, he's here another time, he sees these people sitting, he goes to them, he sits with them, he eats with them, he moves everything. That's how he does. He is an easy person going. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrates a hadith that one day Abu Hurairah was very hungry. And the Sahaba say sometimes they are so hungry that they can't even walk steadily. They had to, use the walls of Medina as a support for them to walk. So Abu Hurairah said, one day I was so hungry, I was sitting by the roadside. And Umar ibn Khattab comes passing by, and I said, Ya Umar, won't you read the Quran to me? And Umar read a few verses of the Quran, and Umar left, and Abu Hurairah said, I'm hungry, read the Quran was a metaphor. You should understand what I mean. You should understand what I mean. And then Abu Bakr comes passing by, and then Abu Hurairah told him, Abu Bakr, won't you read the Quran to me? And then Abu Bakr read the Quran, and he left, and Abu Hurairah says, he also doesn't understand what I mean. Read the Quran is a metaphor. And then the Prophet Muhammad comes passing by, and then he said, Ya Rasulullah, will you read the Quran to me? And the Prophet looked at him and said, Abu Hurairah, you are hungry, let's go home. He said, Naam, Ya Rasulullah, you understand. Abu Hurairah said, when he said, let's go home, I was sure that there was going to be food. They got home, and unfortunately there was no food. The Prophet Muhammad said, Aisha, is there any food? Aisha said, Ya Rasulullah, there's no food. Wow, Abu Hurairah said, wow, when Aisha said there's no food, I was like, man, I'm paraphrasing, man. But Aisha said, Ya Rasulullah, there is a milk that was brought as sadaqah. And the Prophet Muhammad and the Ahlul Bayt, they don't take sadaqah, they don't eat sadaqah. It is haram for the family of the Prophet Muhammad to eat sadaqah. So she said, Ya Rasulullah, there's milk sadaqah. Abu Hurairah said, when I heard there's milk sadaqah, I know the Prophet doesn't take sadaqah. And this milk is going to be me and me alone. And then the Prophet said, Abu Hurairah, go and call Ashabul Sufa. Ashabul Sufa are homeless guys from the Sahaba who were sleeping in the Masjid. When they came in migration, before the Prophet ﷺ gives them places where they can stay, they were lodged in the Masjid. And at a particular time, they had between 60 to 70 people in the Masjid like that. So Abu Hurairah said, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, Abu Hurairah, go and call Ashabul Sufa, he said, the Prophet really sent me, but I was not happy. Because I said, Ya Rasulullah. He said, I said to myself, Ya Rasulullah, you and I are the only ones here, and you do not take sadaqah. And how do Sufa, and I think it's here. Abu Hurairah said, Ya Rasulullah, that's between me and you. Ashabul Sufa, he said, I went and I told him, Rasulullah is calling you. And they themselves, they said, anytime they are being told Rasulullah is calling them, it's one out of two things. Either a verse has been revealed and the Prophet is going to teach them, or there is food. When they saw Abu Hurairah's reaction, they know it's not wahi, it is food. So they went, and then they all sat around the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam always starts everything with his right hand or from his right side. And Abu Hurairah was on the left side of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the milk drinking is going to start from the right of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Abu Hurairah. And Abu Hurairah was giving, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave him the milk to give it to them. So Abu Hurairah was the waiter this time. So Abu Hurairah says, the Prophet took the milk, he prayed, and then he gave it to me. And I give it to the first person. And the person who puts, the bowl or whatever cup, and call. Abu Hurairah says, I look at the person's throat and it is going. I'm like, man, take your time. There's a lot of us here. And then he gives it back to me, and I give it to the next person. Next person put it in his mouth like that until all of them drank from the same bowl. And I look into the bowl, and then the line has not dropped. It's not dropped. And the Prophet said, Abu Hurairah, drink. I drank, and I'll belch. Yeah, excuse me. And the Prophet said, no, Abu Hurairah, add more. I'll drink, and I'll belch. I'll drink, and I'll belch. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So these are some of the miracles of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Sometimes, in another hadith, they go for war, and then there's no water. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam opened his 5 fingers like this, and water started gushing out of his hands, and people brought their containers to fill them with fresh, sweet water. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In another narration, they find a dry well. he gets a bucket, water, he puts water into his mouth, he rinses his mouth, and then he spits the water into the well, and the water starts gushing out of the well, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is just to buttress that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was a simple, easy going man. And Aisha radiallahu anha says, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he comes home, he plays like a child. He's with us, he talks, he mends his own clothes, he grinds, whatever you want, he cuts, he mends his shoes. But the moment he hears Allahu Akbar, Aisha says his face turns as if he doesn't know us, we don't know him, and then he heads straight to the Masjid sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this hadith, the guy could not, differentiate who the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was from the Sahaba, and the Prophet told him, "Naam, I am Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam." And then he said, "Ya Rasulullah, allimni mal iman. Teach me what is iman." I want us to look at something here. In the other hadith that we've read, 3 or 4 hadith, it speaks about what? Islam, Islam, Islam. This hadith, it says what? Iman. Then listen to what the Prophet said. He said, قال تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله وتقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة وتصوم رمضان وتحج البيت. Is there a contradiction here? In the previous hadith, he says Islam, and then he brings the 5. Here, it says Iman, and then he brings the 5. There's no contradiction. Imam al-Khattabi rahimahullah says that the 2 words, Islam and Iman, إذا اجتمعا افترقا وإذا افترقا اجتمعا. They are 2 words, when they meet, they have 2 different meanings. But then when they are apart, they have the same meaning. Let me repeat. Islam and Iman, if they are standing differently, alone, they mean the same thing. But when they are together in a statement, they mean 2 different things. Let me give you an example. Islam and Iman, when they are together, Islam means the external acts of the deen, and Iman means the internal acts of the deen. I hope you get it. When they are together, Islam means what we do that everybody sees, al-zawahir, things that are apparent to everybody, and Iman means things that are hidden. That is when they come together. But then when they are different, Islam is Iman and Iman is Islam. I hope you get it. When Islam stands alone in a statement, it means Islam and Iman. When Iman stands alone, it means Islam and Iman. But then when they come together, Islam means what is apparent, and Iman means what is hidden. I hope you get it. So, even with the 5 pillars of Islam that we spoke about, you have to have Iman to be able to what? To appreciate them, and to be able to what? To practice them. So inshallah, in our next class, we'll expose more on the difference between Islam and Iman, when they meet and when they are different, and what is haqiqatul Islam. When we say Islam, what do we really mean when we say Islam? Today we just look at, different hadith that spoke about the 5 pillars of Islam, meaning that this is something that is part of the deen, and there are plethora of hadith that speak about it. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم. We can stop this. If you have any questions, I think we have